a recording of the NMRA-PCR Coast Division Saturday virtual event, June 18th, 2022. Yeah, just real quickly, all I really wanted to do is just mention a little bit about the National Convention. It's kind of the time to set up if you're interested in going. Let's continue the discussion we were just having about planning for the South Bay event and show your modeling. And I know that may I want to have some time for some comments here. I know Frank at least had one topic he wanted to bring up. One thing I just want to note is, the National Convention is August 13th, August 7th to 13th in St. Louis. It's kind of interesting if you look at the agenda for the convention. There's some pretty amazing layouts and things that are open. Lots of interesting layouts, and the clinic schedule has a fairly large number of clinics that are very interesting. So I think it's going to actually be a very interesting convention. So just wanted to say, if there's an interest in going to the convention, probably something that's a good opportunity to go see. So that was really all I had. I think we were having some conversations about about September 25th and layouts and clinics. But what I wanted to do is throw it over to Frank, because I know Frank had an announcement or a topic he wanted to bring up.
Yeah, let's see. There we go. So Bill Scott, who's in the Daylight Division, was contest chairman for a number of years. But right before him and right after, the plaques were cast in metal. I don't know what the metal was. I have some of them. I should be able to tell. Well, going through his stuff, he found the molds for these. And he wanted to know if anybody at all was interested in getting the molds. He would get them to you. Earl's not on this call. Is anybody interested at all?
This is where you're actually melting metal, so somebody's got to have a furnace or something?
Yeah, exactly. One of the issues and one of the reasons I'm not interested in it is the logo is the old PCR logo. I think it's two logos in back, in fact. Is Ferguson on here? Because he might know. No, he's not. I've got half a dozen plaques that have that on them. They're in a box. So if anybody's interested, get a hold of either Bill Scott or myself. If he doesn't hear anything in a week, they go in the recycling bin.
This is a stupid idea, number 576. Can new logos new pieces be 3D printed and then metallized or something, Phil?
I mean, I think, we can think about different things to do, but I think the problem, Frank, is that, like you said, if it's an old logo, it probably doesn't make sense to try to keep it and reuse it if it can't be reworked. Doesn't make sense.
That was my feeling. I said I wasn't interested. He goes, well, what about for histories? Well,
the problem with history is here's the problem is I don't know when we would ever show it. And like I've got, just so everybody knows, I've got a box with all of the unscanned versions of the newsletter before they were electronic. And, in order to make use, having it sit as a box in my that I've got and somebody passed on to me and I'm going to pass on to somebody else is kind of a stupid comment for history, quite frankly. Unless somebody wants to take the time to scan it. And the question I really wonder is, has anybody here ever had an urge to go back and look at a 2007 newsletter and go read it? just out of pure curiosity, Frank?
Well, not out of curiosity, out of somebody's going for an achievement award. That's the only reason why, to see. They said, well, I want
So that's a good reason to keep those. That is a good reason to keep those. I mean, now probably everything that's an achievement award for folks that are alive and trying to do it's probably digital, but that's a good reason to keep those archives.
That's the only reason I can see. And I have gone back to verify when somebody's applied and they say they won this contest and they got so many points. But
Right.
some of the newsletters don't put how many points the person got.
So yeah, so I kind of feel like from a history perspective, I just don't know when we would ever display it. I mean, to find someone who's willing to volunteer to come to an event and lay out a table of historical artifacts for people to look at, I just, in terms of our priorities of volunteer hours that we can wring out of people, that falls kind of below the line in my mind. I mean, go through it in my head. That's kind of the thought process. So I tend to agree. I think, Frank, we let it go. I don't think we really need to even wait a week. I think the reaction is if the logo's old, and just let it go.
Okay, I will let Bill Scott know that.
Yep.
On another issue, I want to bring this up, and Phil, you're the only one who probably would vote. I got to find out. Is Dave Connery on today?
No, he's not.
Okay. We have the business meeting after at the end of the convention on Sunday morning. And we set up, I just want some input from people before I do something. We set it up that we need 35 there. That was set up when the PCR had 1,600 members. The PCR is down to about 850 members. It varies. It actually is increased a little bit recently. I'm thinking of proposing that we lower that threshold to 25. What do people think about that?
Good idea.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
One of the reasons why this year wasn't a problem, but last year or the year before, I don't remember which year, to get to the 35, because it was a Zoom meeting, and we may have that in the future, by the way. I had to bring in wives that were members also, such as my wife, Steve Skold's wife, and we got 35, but it was really a push. And okay, so I'm going to propose to the board that we lower the number to 25. And
would it help to maybe change it to a % of membership instead? That way you're not changing the numbers each time and having to make a new proposal each time.
That's why I want Dave on, because there's some rules on what you can and cannot do because we're a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that. I couldn't find it in our I couldn't find what the rules are, but a percentage would be good because
I'll come back for the plate.
yeah,
You wouldn't have to keep asking to change the number. It'd just be whatever the percentage is.
well, I think 25 would be good for the next 10 years because we're losing a few every year on average, but it seems to be pretty steady at 800 to 900.
Well, and I think we can, my hope is that we can start beginning to demonstrate some value and differentiation and get some folks, new members, to come back in. I think there's an awful lot of opportunity to, if we have the right message, to recruit some folks, get some new members.
And I think we should, this isn't for now, but I got too many groups going on, but look at previous members and contacting them about rejoining. Because, going through it and being careful not to try and contact people who passed away. Have spouses upset at us, or they're, so we probably need to do that.
So as before we jump off to the 25th, just since we're kind of bringing up questions for the group, so I've got in kind of the back of my mind the idea of these concepts of a field trip. We did the Niles Canyon one earlier. Did obviously the Railroad Museum last year. How do people feel about thinking about another one of those between either now and September or later in the year? Should we try to think about, there are a couple of options. I mean, obviously going up to the trolley, interurban museum up in Sassoon would be an option. Roaring Camp could be an option. I have not really looked into what I'm going to call the prototypical options of, trying to go to some railroad shops or some facilities here locally that are, would be of potential interest. I just kind of wanted to get a feeling, are we doing too many things? If we scheduled something for, let's say we could find something for second week in August to go somewhere for a Saturday 10 to 12 tour, and then maybe we try to set up a couple of open houses in that area in the afternoon. I mean, is that something people think would be fun to do? Is it too much activity? I just trying to get a feel. I'm getting 2 thumbs up, so no thumbs down. It doesn't look like so. Okay, so then, by the way, the second ask is if anybody has a contact anywhere, that at a local, if someone, if you're a volunteer, if you're a docent, if you're a whatever, let me know, and we go ahead between us contact. What I found, by the way, just so this is, by the way, absolutely personal agenda, because I found that doing this with Niles Canyon and actually even the Railroad Museum were both really, really very easy to set up. It's a lot less work, because a lot of times those organizations really want to work with us, because especially if they need volunteers, we're a pretty good volunteer pool for them. So, it's kind of from a selfish perspective, seems like something folks like, everybody likes, and it's reasonably easy to do. So if you have anything, send me an email, and we'll talk about it. I would love to do something in August between the National Convention and Labor Day weekend, the narrow gauge convention, and those couple of weeks that we could find something. That would be about a month before we do our September event. So cool.
Well,
Are you thinking a Saturday, Phil?
Okay, Saturday or Sunday. It's kind of amenable to whatever is a good timing for the organization. Kind of avoiding midweek, just because my concern if we do a midweek event is that the reaction of working people is going to be, oh, you're just scheduling it then because you retirees can go do it. We can't. So kind of my preference, if we're going to put the effort, is to try to do it on Saturday and Sunday so we can open it up to all the working members that have working commitments during the week.
I may
So
still have some contacts at the Golden State Railway Museum who I helped with their CMRI in years past. I don't know, are people tired of seeing that club layout up there in Richmond?
Yeah, I'm
Never get tired.
the treasurer there.
Oh, you're the treasurer.
Yeah, for one of the entities up there. Yeah.
O-N or H-O?
Well, I'm HO, but I'm also learning N.
Ah,
Mhm.
Larry, is the Golden State, are the gang up there open the idea of having visits from groups like us?
Yeah, just need to reach out to the leadership and make arrangements.
Can I work with you to make those contacts, Larry?
Yeah, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to go up there.
Sounds good. Make it a Saturday, though.
Yes,
yeah, if we,
August.
the ideal thing there would be do a Saturday and maybe do, a little bit of a behind the scenes tour kind of thing.
Yeah.
Have it set up for a couple of tours, and by a member that's really familiar with the layout and talking about things about the something more detailed than just having an open house.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll work with Larry in that if you guys don't mind. Is that okay,
Yeah.
Larry?
Sure,
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Just a
Super,
heads
Dave.
up is that the museum, we open to the public on Saturdays, but there's no guarantee that we will run trains on Saturdays. We do run trains on Sundays though, because that's our agreement with the East Bay Regional Park District. So if you come up on a Saturday, it's best to make some arrangements, so we will make sure we run trains that day.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I mean, the thing to do would be to arrange to say, that 10 o'clock folks are going to show up and there's going to, maybe you break the group up into a couple of groups and do 2 tours, one of the N and one of the HO or the N and the O. You can kind of isolate things and go in and do some, real kind of tours and discussions about, issues with the layout and operation, et cetera, et cetera.
We'll see. Larry and I will talk,
Yeah.
Phil, and
Cool.
see what
That'd be great.
we can find that. Larry, can you send me can you throw in chat your email? I'm not sure if I have it to hand.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you, sir.
But by the way, good news is if anybody needs an email, just send me a question. I have emails. So something I can't publish, but I can provide connections. So that was really all I had today. Like I said, the South Bay, if anyone has something they've been doing over the last couple of years that they can would like to turn into a clinic, definitely looking for clinics. We will have a big room. We're going to be able to have a big room inside a smaller room in the boardroom. And then my hope is that we can get a couple of outdoor clinics. So, if someone's interested in doing a clinic on, plaster scenery or something like that, we'll set up a 10 by 10 tilt up outside with a table, and you can do a clinic where you can slew plaster to your heart's content. Or tree making. I mean, the other thing I was thinking was, I do have one of the McHenry Brothers tree making machines. I guess I could bring that. We could go through a demonstration and people could try making some trees. That would be another example of something we could do outdoors. I just try to think about things, because we could do an outdoor clinic and then some indoor clinics. Indoors are more traditional clinics, or anything. Anybody who's got a demonstration clinic of weathering, painting, anything that's interesting like that would be super.
Okay, I've got 2 names down so far, folks. This is a rush. You have to get in soon. Now, the window only stays open so long here. I got Ed Holm on trees. I got Gibbons on soldering. Anybody else want to maybe not say a specific time or anything else, but anybody else game to share some knowledge at the 25th? All right, I'll be back talking to you all on this topic of clinics, and I need to put something in the next newsletter, Phil.
We eventually will get to the very uncomfortable pause where we just wait, nobody talks till somebody says something. So anybody doing an interesting modeling? Any interesting modeling and things that folks have been working on?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
You sure can. Hang on, let me do.
Sorry, I got something I can share screen. It's a pretty quick show. I have a friend who does ON3, and he was wanting to make some ore cars, something similar to the Bachmann. So I printed these side frames. I pretty much stole the design from Bachmann, who stole it from Reality, I think, and printed the side frames here with filament and printed the end beams with resin, just for more accuracy for the gauging. And then eventually I started printing everything in resin, and chopped off the ends a little bit for shorter ones. And someone asked, or he said he also had an ON2 that he wanted. So I made some end beams for ON2. So it was a pretty quick and fairly, not a very difficult build. While I've got the mic, I started talking earlier, but for some reason my mic wasn't working. Today would have been a great day for a trip to the Golden Gate, because just 15 minutes away is the Bay Area Prototypes meet. So Jay and I are going to go up right after the meeting here and catch both events.
A question on those assemblies you did. I see 2 holes in the tabs and the cross beams for mounting screws.
Yes,
So these are non-swiveling. This is a short a truck for something that just is only running on 2 axles.
it's actually, it's a four-wheel, like you could put this under a bobber caboose. But he was, what they're copied from is their, Bachmann makes a set of ON 30 tipper, like Hudson type tipper cars. And I just copied that, down to the 10th of a millimeter, and then played with it a little bit to make my end beams work. Bachmann end beams are pretty similar. So you could put a coupler in there in each of those, or you could put a Lincoln pin coupler or a KD coupler in it. He's going to put, the guy who asked for them is going to use, he's using the Grant line or cars that are, I forget the type, but they're very boxy, and they have a V in the center, and the doors open, open sideways. The doors open out for ore. So that's what he's doing with them.
Another question for you, Fran, is are these needle point axles?
Yes, they are.
How does this 3D printed material, the plastic there, withstand the stresses of the needle point bearing, and how do you form the cone-shaped depressions?
The cone-shaped depression is just a CAD trick. It's pretty simple. You take a cone and you make it a negative space and you place it where you want. The wear and tear will probably come down to the weight and the fit. I don't know. I've been making these this type of truck and four-wheel cars for 3 years now. I haven't had any issues. They're not like, they float a little bit because I make the cone, negative space cone, just a little bigger than the tip to tip axles. Right. So there is a little bit of float to it where, one wheel can lift when it needs to. Mm-hmm. It's not a whole lot.
Do you match the angle of the cone of the wheel to the angle of the cone of the negative space exactly, or do you make those slightly different?
I make it wider. So there's.
Well, but I'm thinking about there's the width, but there's also the angle, because
right.
I'm thinking that and I don't know. I've never thought about it. With needle bearings, I'm assuming the idea is not to have all of the weight at the point, but rather on the rounded bearing spurs that's going around. So having the angle of the negative space and the angle of the bearing be the same, so they're riding across the whole thing, to seem to be pretty important. Are those kind of like a standard angle, or?
No, it's usually like a 45-degree cone, and you definitely want it wider than the pin tip, the needle tip.
Right.
And that way you can go a little more narrow. So only the tip is riding. I can't, 90% of this I do in Tinkercad, and you cannot measure angles in Tinkercad. You can measure diameters and length, but you cannot measure like the angle of a cone. So
you have to calculate it based on the diameter.
Yeah, I stay close to 45 degrees. And then I put, you can't see it here, but in the bottom of the slot of the hollow cone, on one side, like on this wheel here and on this wheel here, there's a slot that makes it easier to insert the axle without bending so much that you break. Like the resin, you could break the resin if there wasn't a slot there that would minimize the bending. The filament could take it, no problem. But the resin I made a little thinner too, look a little more realistic. I'm here in a photo trying to rotate it for you, and it doesn't work. Okay.
I know I have this tiny tool which you stick in the
Yes.
trucks to get the clean up the cone-shaped depressions in there so they roll better. I always thought the idea is the tips of the axles, the pointed axles, you bear just in the tip to minimize the friction. But you know that's usually against acetal type plastics, often called Delrin,
Yeah.
which I think are naturally low friction, and so you know I just wonder about if I start using 3D printed trucks for some reason on a car weighted to NMRA standards where the loading on is fairly high, how
You
that
see,
would
I
how that
think the
would do.
intent is not to ever have the weight on the needle. The weight is intended to be on the rolling surface of the bearing this way at an angle out there. That's the way roller bearings are designed to work. And the tip is just designed to keep the distance on the side to side. So it's actually moving on these, it should be moving on these surfaces, and the tip should be just barely touching, because the actual weight carrying is here, not on the tip. You don't want all that. I mean, imagine the mass on the tip versus the mass on the touching. If you've got a roller this way, right? Because the roller's around this way. So it's touching up here on a linear surface that's the length of the roller width touching on the plastic. If you translate that much weight down to just the tip, you're talking about a 50x increase in weight.
Yeah, you will have some wear then. But I find that a little bit of graphite and a pencil tip is the easiest. A sharpened pencil, stick it in there and twist it one time. And that's enough lubrication probably for a long, long time. Yeah, ideally, you know, the Delrin, I think if I had Delrin, I could come a lot closer to those tips.
Have you run the tool? Have you tried the MicroMark tool inside yit?
No.
I've got one of those. I got one of those. We should try that, because I think I thought with that it's like a cutter, but it's at the right angle of the angle of the tapered pin, needle bearing. And so by putting those in, it's what you're doing is you're kind of contouring that plastic hole to exactly match the needle bearing so it rests properly.
Phil, looking at an axle point on some of the axles I have here, I would say the tool actually is a slightly broader angle than
That's interesting.
Than the tip.
Than the tip.
Yes,
so
has to be.
Yeah, I think
If
it,
you
Phil, I
have
think
a
it
wear-
does run on the tip.
If you have a wear problem, it'll very rapidly wear to fit, and problem solved.
Yeah. Another thing, if we're printing these with filament, you don't get on the inside of that cone, you don't get a 0 point. It comes to something, I don't know, I can't simulate it with my hand, but it comes to something more like that than like that.
Right.
Resin, you get a lot closer. So I should get that tool. I looked at it a couple times, but I haven't had any problems or complaints.
Your fit should be good.
Yeah,
Cool.
I just am partly interested because I'm interested in modeling trains that have 20, 30, 40 cars in my dream layout someday when I get to that point. And then having good free rolling stock is important. With the clubs I've been in, we actually defined a roll down. We set a certain slope of a few degrees or a few percent, and a car had to freely roll down it without, being pushed. And so having really good, well-behaved truck wheel set interaction was important to us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I use that little tool a lot.
With these and with my flat cars and gondolas, you can tune them. I mean, you can take the wheel out and just put the pencil lead in. You can, if you want, squeeze and roll it with a lot of weight directly on the, you gotta keep the weight where you're not going to break anything. And you'll make a little more room. Like if one doesn't roll well, you can tune it. But so far, everything that I've made is not intended for what you're doing, David, for mainline multi-train. I just like industry, small stuff, industry, mining, and tiny, fictitious.
For most of us, 6 cars is a long train.
Yeah.
To the size of the layout.
Yeah. So is Earl on? No, I don't know. Okay.
Which brings to mind another question. These days, to do the sort of work you're doing, Fran, how much money would I have to disgorge to buy a printer capable of doing the sort of work you're doing, or the work that Phil is doing, for example, making those rafter assemblies? What's the cost to get into that game now?
Around 200. You might get in under 200 just for the printer.
Yeah, the filament I bought, I think about just over 200, 210 to 220, including some filament. And the way to think about the filament is that's more structural, and then the resin is more detailed. I think that's more going to be probably a little bit more money, because you need to buy some sort of cleaning stuff and the UV for setting the resin. So I think by the time you get done, the resin is probably more like 350 to 400.
And you need an environment for the resin, and you need a mindset that you're a chemist. The way you're handling the stuff for safety, you really need to watch your lungs and your hands, your skin, your eyes. So the other thing that I always tell people, or model railroaders, when they're interested, is be aware that you're starting another hobby, a hobby that unless you're retired and stay up 20 hours a day, you're not going to have the same amount of time for your railroading that you have now.
Got it. Well, Phil, coming off of what he just said, the structures you displayed at the auction.
Yep.
Did you feel that it took more or less time to make that structure with 3D printing compared to cutting sticks and glue?
Probably more time, but it's because, kind of imagine if you were building a structure and you didn't have any specialized tools like a chopper.
Mm-hmm.
So you start off building a structure and all you have is a basic razor knife and a square and a ruler. And you didn't kind of know what you were doing. I mean, I think the problem is, once you know what you're doing, here, let me show you something. So this, actually my system crashed. Let me see. I didn't crash. I guess if Microsoft reinstalls your software, do you consider that a personal crash, or do you consider it just an intervention?
It's a Microsoft feature.
It's a Microsoft feature, right? We've reset you. So, hang on, let me share this. I had to get it restarted.
One thing while Phil's resetting is the first one takes the majority of the time, the design and the checking, the proofing. After that, it's just a matter of starting the printer and go do something else until it's done.
So this, just to give you an idea, this is for that cannery, the cannery I'm building. So this is an O-scale part. These wall thicknesses right here are essentially 1 inch, or 1 foot in O scale, which is 1/4 inch. So this is designed to be a concrete framed wall. And then this inset here is designed so I can cut a piece of Plastistruct, a concrete block material. and put in there. So this will be a finished wall with concrete framing and then bricks and, block inserted inside. So the block will not be 3D printed. It's more cost effective to buy 2 sheets of that. You get a 12-inch by 5-inch sheet, 2 of them for $15, which is pretty cost effective. And it looks much better for the material. But what's interesting about this is, so I kind of, the thought process here is starting with, okay, how am I going to build this? Well, how am I going to inset? Where am I going to glue stuff? And then the next question is, okay, this is one piece and there's going to be a piece on top of it. So I started with the idea of doing pins. And then what I realized was, well, you can put fingers in here because the piece above won't have this. It'll just have the offset here for gluing this. But I can have that have a finger that goes down in here. So when you glue the next piece of wall on, and then of course, the next question is, how do you do the corners with the piece that you want to see out the corner? And you can see the same thing. There's an idea of a pin here that goes in, but also a slot that's going to be molded into the other piece. So the interesting thought here is that took about probably an hour into that piece. But most of the thought process was not in the basic design of the shape. It was the thought process about how do you put the accoutrements on this so you can assemble it in a logical way. Because, by the way, I'm almost at the point with that stuff that you could design these in a way where you print them out and they're almost blocks to assemble buildings. They're almost like, it's almost like the parts that you used to buy from some of the manufacturers where they're kind of standard wall sections. You can get pretty close to that. So once you get the thought process together of how you're going to do it, then the design goes really fast. It's the thought process. And quite frankly, for the stick built stuff, from my perspective, I've got that thought process down now. I mean, you want to design a stick built building, I can probably do it in an hour or two and get it ready to print.
Well, from
Because
what
I
you
now
and
know the process. Well, you start this way, you know how it is, you got all the dimensions built in your head and that. And it's no different than, if you do stick built buildings, you start and say, okay, I've got to have a chopper. I've got to chop everything at this size. Then I build a little jig that sets the walls. And, very quickly you get to the point where you've got a few tools that help you do it. The difference with the tools in 3D printing, the tools are all intellectual. It's all kind of in your head and how you can, like Fran said, the thing that Fran said that you didn't realize is, he said, well, it's a CAD trick that you just do a cone and you invert it and you remove the material and that makes a hole. And it's that little thought process of knowing how to do that, knowing how to put it at the right place, knowing how deep you should make it. The first 2 times you go through it, you got to print it and it doesn't work. But once you got the dimensions figured out, then for the rest of eternity, it's done. Is that
the thing,
kind of a good way to think about it, Fran?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the learning process that becomes. I mean, the reality is these guys that do this for a living, I think, do a lot less learning because they've done 99% of their learning all the time. It's the same thing then. For us, it's just all learning because nobody's done it before.
the thing here is that, okay, here you go. This is one of the little Overtons. I'm making a Christmas train for around the tree for my wife who loves Christmas. And I can see now as you guys are talking that the product I purchased off the internet, a 3D printed interior for a baggage car or a 3D printed interior for a coach, they did it once and then they just sit there and crank them out and sell them to others. So they do the work once and then they're just selling it, making repeated
Right.
runs. And it seems like that's the real strength is, I take your point that after a while you can get your moves down so you can make your stick built walls and stuff
Right.
more efficiently. But it seems like the real power is design it once and then make it many times.
Well, it's design it once and make it many times. It's also the idea that, if you go from that Overton car from a 34-foot to a 40-foot, and you've got to change the spacing, right? So those seats are all designed with a spacing. The spacing is based on the windows. Let's say you go to a different car and the spacing on the windows is 3 inches, scale inches wider on each one. It's really easy to extend the base of that and change the spacing on the seats and relay it out. So you can take the basic design. First design might take you 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours to do, even longer to design it, print it, make sure it prints right. But once you've got that done, adapting it to variations becomes much easier. And reusing components. I mean, I'm sure Fran can tell you there are components that he reuses all the time that you design them once, then you can pull them in and reuse them.
The comical part as you say that, Phil, is I've got the baggage car. The seats don't line up with the windows.
Right. Well, and they're probably because what they did was they just left them the same. It's you know, again, I think it's kind of what you find interesting to do. I mean, sometimes I find it the understanding the intellectual tricks and doing them. So, you know, this is designed so you can change one variable and change the seat spacing. So if you want to change it for a different car, it's really easy to do.
Right.
I mean, thinking about doing that when you did the original design, so you're designing for variability for the future, is again one of those kind of intellectual challenges when you do this stuff. And again, you don't kind of have that with stick built, because every piece you cut is individual and won't ever be repeated necessarily.
No. Yes, I do.
I'm going to mute you.
Sounds like management's checking in on labor out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep, Jonathan's walking, so it's I muted you, Jonathan, because we were getting your walking background noise. And
Someone
there's
might.
Earl. Welcome, Earl.
Oh, good.
Good morning.
Hey, Earl.
Good morning.
So sorry for coming in late. You know, you guys were talking about 3D printing. This is, I don't know if it's going to show up or not here.
Turn off your virtual background.
Yeah, let me go do that, then I'll come back on.
Yeah, it keeps trying to interpret those things as a human head, and it's hard to figure out how something square becomes a human head.
There's several jokes that come to mind when you say that, Phil, but we'll let them lie.
Right. I know, I understand. It's just really interesting. If you ever watch it, I mean, you put something up like this and you can kind of see the AI trying to figure out what to do. You know, and it's can be very confused.
While we're waiting for Earl, real quick, when David, when we were talking about the car weights and trucks, the standard NMR weight for cars, I'm not familiar with it, but if you have a four-wheel car, do you cut that weight in half?
Well, the thing is, I think there are two things there, Fran. One is the car's ability to resist an overturning moment in a curve, especially in the sharp curves that we use in our models that we're forced to use. The ability to not have the car tip over or stringline to be sucked off the track is one element. And the thing is, the loading on there also, I think loading on the wheels helps the wheels behave as they go through turnouts and everything else. And I think, and this would have to be somebody who's involved with the standards development how many years ago, about whether they were more concerned about cars coming off the rails in a curve being pulled off versus the tracking. That's where I was last time I was talking about. I have this car here that has it's this guy with the 4 trucks underneath it, and I'm thinking I want to double the weight there just so I keep the loading per axle up there on a
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a couple there's pluses and minuses here. In the end, what I'm gonna have to do is take that car and like make it weight it, probably dummy weight it first before I put the intended load on the car, which is this damaged Amtrak engine that was damaged in a wreck. I'll just put some lead on top of it and run it through some switches and stuff and run it light and then weight it to the NMRA standard and then double weight it and see whether I see a difference. So I think the same thing would be true for a 2-axle thing. It'd be just empirical. If you have a little layout, just experiment with it. Phil, you back? You're muted, I think, Phil.
I think all the weight stuff is based on length.
Yes.
So at least theoretically, a 2-wheel car would be much shorter length.
Okay, Earl.
Hey, Fran. So this is one of the parts I've been working on. This is a 3D printed bracket to hold the stepper motor. And the interesting thing is this whole 3D printed part slides up and down. So I've got the vertical adjustment that comes off, and then there's, this pulley, that mounts onto the stepper motor. The pulley is kind of interesting. This is also a 3D printed part, and it's a one-piece pulley with the groove in there already, which was kind of an interesting print because, as Fran and Phil know, you have to break away that captive annular ring inside there. So, that's the nice thing again with 3D printing is you can come up with these parts. This is a different version of the same pulley, and this mounts right on the motor shaft. And you can see there's a 440 nut and bolt. So there's a captive nut with the screw, so I can clamp the pulley right on the stepper shaft.
I was
So
wondering
this
how
is-
you were handling the set screw problem. Nicely done.
Yeah, I saw that on the web somewhere, and this is really nice because before I was buying couplings and had a big standoff and everything. So now it's a nice kind of a compact thing. And, something like this is, extremely difficult to make by hand. And on 3D print, this was, there's a couple of versions of this bracket till I got it right, but much less time and much stronger than if I would have made it.
And what is that pulley pulling on? Just out of curiosity.
So this is to a side project I'm doing for someone else to animate this.
Mm.
So it'll rotate and then the hook will come up and down. So this is the pulley for the hook. So you can see I've
Okay.
got a little bolt sticking up and a limit switch. So I know where the hook all the way up is. And then I just, unwind the pulley to lower the hook.
Would that be underneath the table, or is it
Goes
large scale?
underneath the table.
Yeah.
And then
Well-
there's a whole drive to rotate it also, which is again another 3D printed pulley.
I don't
Fun.
know, guys. Do you think that Earl's got the core of something interesting for a clinic on the 25th? Hint, hint. Says the clinic chair.
We'll see.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah, so I don't know if I showed this. I don't think I showed this last time. This is just one little. So this is a roof for a building. So basically it's the part that's actually the roof. This backing plate here, this is 3D printed as two pieces and glued together. So that's basically the truss joist, the joist here, top joist of the beam of the roof. And then this is a sign up above, and this will be filled in with a printed sign image. So it'll be painted. I'm waiting for the paint. These are individually printed trusses then that clip into that. And the idea is they'll glue in there. And then there's a cover piece that's got the rest of the roof here. So I can just put the aluminum siding on. And what I realized was trying to put it together was going to be a challenge. So this is kind of just a really interesting thought. This little gray at the bottom here is just a 3D printed tray to hold these pieces during assembly. And it turns out because you have all these dimensions already set, designing that took about a minute. That took literally about 5 minutes, and then printing it took about 15, 20 minutes. So literally in about a half an hour, you can create a little jig to do an assembly. So interesting thought, even if you were doing stick-built construction, doing a 3D printed jig to actually hold stuff while you glued it together might be interesting. So
I see that's what I'm doing with the 3D printer a lot right now is making jigs and fixtures and things that can't be seen and then covering them with, roofing
wood.
material or siding material.
it's great for an interior framing for something
I think of the articles I've seen recently, like in Model Railroader, where the inside wall of a building, the person takes a chunk of styrene, cuts out the holes for the windows and everything else and preps it up. but you could 3D print that and then apply board and batten or whatever to the outside and perhaps make that job a little
It- it-
easier.
it's actually interesting. Bill Banta has changed, I think, recently, and all of his new kits are almost all built with the concept of a 2-layer wall. There's
Mhm.
an inner wall that's basic material, and then there's an outer wall that's finished material that's put on it. And a lot of it now is his outer layer is not sheet material.
Mm.
It's an awful lot of, put a building frame together with laser cut plywood and cover it with strip wood
Mm.
to get that much more, much more scratch built look to it. Yeah, there was a build along for the warehouse he has now, and it's very much that idea of building a box and then covering it for your building. So that's absolutely an interesting way of thinking about this.
Hmm.
No matter what it is inside. I mean, especially on the smaller scales, an HO for building buildings that are not going to be close enough to the front of your layout where people can see inside. If you're not going to do an interior, why not build it on top of just a block?
Right.
Unless you want to light it inside. If it's not going to be illuminated, then it doesn't really matter.
That's the way the Mount Blue car that I just built was done, but it was actually done with 2 finished surfaces. The finished surface on the inside and then the finished surface on the outside.
Oh, that is that you had 2 sheets of material. One had decoration appropriate for the inside of the thing, and then the other outside had the finisher decoration for the outside of the car, and then you stick them together.
Exactly.
Sandwich.
Sandwich.
Hmm.
But it was a structural sandwich.
Yeah.
And that also created the joints for the gluing.
Hmm.
So you put the ends and the ends and the sides together much easier.
Yeah. Oh, the pieces are at the ends, they're staggered a little bit so the other can engage with that little step.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the window frames and door frames all work the same way too.
Right.
So Mount Blue did a fantastic job in their design.
Yeah, here's
Are we seeing I'm going to go back again to bear with me, the 3D modeling thing. Are we starting to see companies coming out with kits for buildings and stuff that contain all or some 3D printed parts to get away from the cost of making molds for injection molding? Is that starting to happen?
Wild West is.
They are?
Yeah, I think you're seeing more of the detail. A lot of the detail parts are becoming 3D printed. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's a volume trade-off thing where you go from making a mold versus doing it. The time domain of the 3D print production is high, so it's a volume thing, right? So if I'm going to make 10 of something, if you assume that the CAD work is the same, right? So once you've got a CAD design, you can take that CAD design and you can generate hard tooling with it to do injection molding or something like that. Or you can take that design and you can 3D print it in a 3D print process. And if you use a resin process like Fran does, you're probably getting a resolution that is within a reasonable percentage of what you could get in a high-end injection mold system. So, if you say, okay, the outcome is within reasonable comparison, and the design effort is the same to get it to the same point in CAD, then the question is just the production. And the production is really, in this case, is pretty damn simple, right? it's a volume question. I had my original computer science professor said, if you're, computer science is easy on the edges. If you're building 5 of something, you buy all the hardware you can, so you make the software development easy, and you can build lousy software and still work. If you're building 1 million of something, you optimize the heck out of the software to minimize the cost of the hardware. He says, that's easy. He says, what do you do if you're building 150 of something or 5,000? That's where the optimization. And so it's a real optimization question, right? So if I'm building a kit like some of the Sierra West ones, and I'm going to build 500 kits, the cost of the injection molding creation, which also is coming down, by the way, versus the time cost of the time cost of the 3D printing is where the trade-off is, right? So if each part takes 2 hours or 5 hours to print, it's that much time on a 3D printer versus the cost of generating the mold and doing the injection run. And by the way, the smaller the injection run, the more it is per part, because there's all this stuff, there's setup time, right? It's generating the mold, it's getting in the mold machine, getting the plastic set up, getting the run set up, then you hit the button, it just starts injecting. If you're doing 10,000 of them, it's a division of that first amount of time by the number. So it's mathematically, I'm assuming once you get the low run kits, 3D printing just kills the cost curves compared to the cost of producing, a die and all that. I don't know. If anybody's familiar with that, it would be fascinating to understand that in more. That's kind of my level of understanding is qualitative. I don't understand the quantitative numbers, like how much does it cost to get a die made?
I'm thinking people that want HO scale mailboxes, HO scale fire hydrants, that if I'm not mistaken, you can tell the printer to just make a plate with 25 mailboxes in one print run, right? So you can crank out details, particularly if it's the same thing, because you've designed the mailbox and you just tell the printer, I just want 25 mailboxes on the plate, and then you just print it, cut them off, and sell them.
Yeah, hang on, let me. I'll show you one that's the.
Again, when you say sell, be aware that you're going down another rabbit hole that's going to take a whole lot of time out of your modeling.
Right.
I think Jay's here. Hang on.
Does anybody, while those guys are hunting up stuff, does anybody else have any questions, comments, or knock jokes for the gang this morning?
Hey, Jay's here. We're leaving for Golden Gate and for the prototype modelers.
Have a good time.
Hey, they're good.
Enjoy.
See you, friend.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to show you. So we're doing bolsters. We're printing for the Oak Club in Pleasanton. We're printing the bolsters for the All Nations easels, and they're about an inch and a half by 3/4 of an inch each one. And that's exactly what I do. Is I just put 8 of them on and set the printer on, and it prints for 12 hours. And you come back and there are 8 of them. And you can do the same thing, and same thing in the resin printer, right? Because you can print them out, as a kind of an array, and you kind of and then when you come back, they're all there, done printed. You take them out, you rinse them, and you UV cure them, and then you got to trim them off because you're probably going to have some connections then at some points. But yeah, that's the whole thing is that, that if you look at that guy, that mini prints, I don't know if you've ever looked at his site from an HO. He's actually, let me get it. I'll put it up here. Because that's what he does is he, So this is a guy, he's up in, I think he's somewhere out like in Newfoundland in Canada or somewhere. But we don't want his mini prints newsletter. But you know, you can look here at he does a lot of animals. And so if you want,
Wow.
you know, kind of any kind of animal here. So if you're doing that Southwestern and you want your cow skulls, you can get 4 cow skulls. They're unpainted for 11, depending on your scale, right? Different prices. So they're typically about $3 or $4 a figure, but they're pretty good quality, it seems like.
That looks like good foreground stuff.
Yeah, exactly. This is all foreground, you know, and you know, of course, the interesting thing is, you know, that's what they say is that, you know, if people see it in the foreground, they'll assume it in the background. So you just put this stuff up in the foreground. You know, birds, there's a lot of interesting things with birds and things he's got. So, and if you actually, he's kind of interesting. If you want a specific animal and you send it to him, sometimes he'll actually build it for you. So,
Hmm.
um,
And that's right. He's completely scale independent, isn't he? He's got it designed. He can print it in whatever
right,
scale you want.
right. Once you get the design and you get the figure designed, you can move it between scales.
Hmm.
And so, you know, you want that Father's Day limited edition. You know, it's, I guess, $20 in O and 10 in HO.
Hmm.
And that was actually digitized from a picture, it looks like. So, you know, the other thing is that they're now at the point where they can do digitization from pictures and things. And so going back to your railroad car, here's your dining car staff.
Amazing.
So yeah, and so but I'll put this in the let me actually go back here to just his website. It's just Mini Prints is the name of the company, but yeah, there's some pretty amazing companies out there now that are building stuff. That's the one good reason to go to the narrow gauge convention is you tend to see a lot of that at the narrow gauge convention. I think Chuck's going. You're going up, aren't you, Chuck?
No, not this year.
Ah. So
I've unfortunately gotten involved in a cruise at the wrong time.
Cruises are good too.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a bunch of us going, so it was difficult to change everybody's mind about the date.
Yeah.
So before we close, we still got a few folks. Is there anyone who has a topic that they would like to talk about next 2 weeks from Saturday as a clinic topic, something you'd like to do? I don't know if there's anything from the convention that somebody would like to try to contact someone to redo something that could be done virtually. I mean, is there any topic that folks would like to hear and go through?
I'm a bit tied up, Phil. I've got, I'm going to be putting together a couple of sheds in 1-to-1 scale. We're having to pull out of our storage locker where my wife and I have a lot of our stuff stored. We've been burgled twice. They've broken into it twice now, and we're paying over $800 a month for the privilege of being broken into. So we're busy trying to get a lot of property donated and a lot of other stuff. I have to build these sheds and then move everything around. So I'm pretty busy with that stuff.
Okay.
So I'm, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know,
Working
you know,
on
if somebody
modeling.
had something they'd done recently, I don't really have anything that's new that I can do. I can think about it, but I was hoping somebody else might have something. So
I did install and set up a Sprog for here in my workbench for programming and driving. Uh, uh, my programming set up for programming decoders if nothing else is on offer.
That's, I think that's something a lot of folks will go through and, why don't we think about, we can do that. If nothing else, we'll have a conversation, see if anybody comes
Okay.
forward.
All right, I'll hold that as I can do that just as a backstop.
Well, I hate to say this, but I am going to hand off to someone else because I am going to I need to go down and make sure that the railroad at the Alameda Fair gets running this morning. It opens at 11 and I need to get down there and just make sure because we have neither of our train masters or our president are available. So I'm kind of
Yep.
the fallback person to make sure everything gets started in time. So
I've got to
I'm gonna
take,
hand off to someone. I will probably hand off to David
no,
and
I
let
have to take my stepdad and his daughter, my wife, to a Father's Day dinner, and so I'm gonna have to scoot also.
It sounds like we ought to just close today.
maybe it's just a good time to close today and have a short. It's good, just good to have a get together. It's kind of summer times. There's so much going on between the prototypes. I want to go down to the club and actually get them going, and then I'm going to try to drive up to Richmond because I just like to check it out. I really regret I couldn't go for the day. I would have hoped to. It's just unfortunately got to commit on the other side. Can't avoid that. We had almost 2,000 people yesterday, so.
Whoa.
Gee.
Yeah, well,
Wow.
you know,
Nice.
the thing about the Alameda, the layout at the fairgrounds, people don't realize is we're going to probably have 45 to 50,000 visitors in this next. It's open till July 10th. Let's not think about that. So basically, every Wednesday to Sunday and July 4th from now till July 10th. I think it's 18 days.
Hmm.
So, and there are times when you just literally you can't walk in the place; it gets packed as groups come in. So they get done with the motorcycle. They put the motorcycle jumping right next to us now. So I'm actually serious. They have the motorcycle jumping. All of a sudden, you can tell the motorcycles got done because this huge crush of people. They turn around and they see our sign and they come in.
One quick question for you, Lee, Phil, is somebody like me able to volunteer to help man the layout during this crush you
Sure.
guys are going to have?
Sure. If you're interested, and the really good news is that I'm the guy who's doing all of the distribution of stuff. So yeah, I'd love to have you. If you want to come down and experience it, maybe we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
Give me a call and we'll set it up.
I should be caught up on some other real life stuff outside.
Yeah.
So everybody have a
It's
good
a fun
week.
thing. Anyway, we'll see you guys. Have a great.
Phil,
Be well.
Phil, before you sign
Phil?
off, can you and I chat for 30 seconds at the end?
Absolutely.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Have a great week. I'm going to shut off the recording now.